Hear ye, hear ye! Welcome to medieval times, where the knights fight valiantly, the ale flows endlessly, and the wenches serve bottomless Pepsi. For over 40 years, medieval times has been among the most popular dinner theaters in America. But just how did Middle Ages entertainment find its way stateside? And asking for a friend here, how exactly does one become a medieval times knight? Today, we're going back to the Dark Ages with the history of medieval times. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History Food channel and let us know in the comments below what other dinner theaters you would like to hear about. All right, time for a night of feasting and sport, the likes of which you will never forget.
Fabulous!
On May 18th of 1778, Frenchman John André put on the elaborate Miss Kenza, which, translated from Italian, means medley. Simply put, the Miss Kenza was a festival meant to honor British General Sir William Howe and his service as Commander-in-Chief of the Redcoats during the American Revolution's earliest years. They, maybe should have held off on that celebration. This rather extravagant affair cost over $500,000 in today's money, and as its name would suggest, it featured a variety of entertainment for its more than 400 guests, including multiple bands, dancing, a military procession, a banquet, and fireworks, along with a 17-gun salute from a fleet of British warships. It's the kind of thing they would have put on primetime if television had been invented. At the center of the celebration was a throwback to the festivals of medieval Europe, the first known American jousting tournament. The tournament featured 12 knights, who were all, in actuality, officers of the British Army. John André divided these 12 officers, knights, into two separate teams, the Knights of the Blended Rose and the Knights of the Burning Mountain. And he provided each individual knight with his own accompanying squire, herald, trumpeter, and lady, which was nice because nobody had brought their own. The mock joust that followed was all for show, but the entertainment was all too real. It turns out that jousts are a real blast to watch. British officer and historian Charles Stedman wrote that the entire affair was one of the most ridiculous, undeserved, and unmerited triumphs ever yet performed. While John André would go on to play a pivotal role in turning Benedict Arnold against the Continental Army, and would likewise be hanged in 1780 on orders from George Washington himself, his legacy as a medieval jousting enthusiast lived on. Still, jousting wouldn't become an American mainstay for another 3/4 of a century. In 1841, William Gilmore, inspired by a Scottish jousting tournament he himself had witnessed firsthand just 2 years earlier, put on a tournament of his very own. Soon, everyone south of the Mason-Dixon wanted a taste of medieval Europe's favorite sport, and the 1840s and 50s saw an explosion of jousting events in farming communities all across the American South. Many of the earliest American jousting champions were likewise dairy farmers, riding on the stock horses that were otherwise raised for rounding up cattle. During the Civil War, jousting tournaments naturally became harder to find, but they still continued to be held as Confederate fundraisers, meant to help fund the war. After the war was over, these jousting fundraisers pivoted away from the war effort and towards the creation of Confederate monuments. The tradition of jousting persisted in the South right on into the 20th century. And in 1962, the Maryland General Assembly even went so far as declaring jousting the state sport, making Maryland the first state in the nation to recognize its very own sport, and the first state to recognize jousting in any capacity. In the 1960s, José Montaner, an entrepreneur who claimed to have been a direct descendant of Charlemagne, operated a barbecue restaurant on his family's farm located on the Spanish island of Majorca. Majorca, which has been a popular European vacation destination since the end of World War II, had a competitive restaurant scene at the time. Think Times Square or Universal City Walk. And Montaner knew he'd have to change up his business model if he wanted to pry those much-desired British and German customers away from his competitors. One day, he overheard some British tourists talking about their love of medieval fairs, and he got to thinking, what if he replicated the medieval fair experience right at his own barbecue restaurant? Inspired by 1961's El Cid, a 3-hour Charlton Heston epic loosely based on the life of the 11th century warlord Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar, Montaner replicated the 11th century medieval experience. He created a show that featured dueling knights, horseback riding, and serving wenches, and soon he had a lucrative tourist trap on his hands. After opening a second location on Spain's mainland, in Benidorm, his medieval dinner theaters carried on for almost 2 whole decades before any international investors seemed to take notice. But take notice, they did. In the 1980s, Montaner and a group of investors developed a plan to bring Montaner's dinner theaters to America. Naturally, they set their sights on Orlando, which had recently become a tourist hotspot with the 1971 opening of Walt Disney World, and settled on a piece of land on Tourist Row in Kissimmee, just 20 minutes down the road from the Magic Kingdom's main entrance. There, they built a 50,000 square foot 11th century castle for the low price of $3.8 million, set to open in December of 1983. Wonder how much that is in gold coins. Meanwhile, over in Spain, Montaner's original medieval dinner theaters were shut down, seemingly so that he could give the burgeoning American chain his full attention. Allegedly, Montaner even wanted to hire Charlton Heston himself for the new restaurant's grand opening, but the actor was too expensive. In its first full year in America, Medieval Times' Kissimmee location saw 183,000 peasants, tourists, come through its doors. Within a decade, that number would increase threefold. Other investors soon took notice of Medieval Times' success, and Orlando quickly saw the introduction of 4 more dinner theaters, all of which are now defunct. These included the popular Arabian Nights, the imported from England King Henry's Feast, the boisterous Mardi Gras, and the Wild West-themed Fort Liberty. All the while, Medieval Times started to expand their own business. In 1986, they opened a second location in Buena Park, California, and in 1990, they opened their third location in Lyndhurst, New Jersey. Visitors to any of these locations would be treated to choreographed sword fights and jousting, falcon hunting demonstrations, and majestic Andalusian horses. They would likewise enjoy a 4-course meal featuring soup, chicken, corn, and potatoes, all served without a single utensil in sight. You've got to eat with ye old mitts. It was actually a selling point. As the 90s wore on, the chain opened 3 more locations, and they likewise received a huge visibility boost after being featured in a memorable scene in Jim Carrey's 1996 cult classic, The Cable Guy. Filming of the scene caused California's Buena Park location, which was normally open 365 days a year, to close its doors for the first time in a decade. However, not even an appearance in The Cable Guy could keep the Internal Revenue Service from knocking at their door. After a drawn-out court battle with the IRS, the Buena Park location was ordered, in 1997, to pay $7.5 million in back taxes for making improper deductions during the 1987, 88, and 89 tax years. The Orlando location was likewise ordered to pay back $2.5 million for the same violation, and both locations ended up filing for bankruptcy. Luckily, both locations eventually pulled through, and Medieval Times galloped nobly into the 21st century. Today, there are 10 Medieval Times locations in operation, 9 in the United States and 1 in Toronto. The chain remains privately owned, and Jose Montaner's son, Perico Montaner, is the company's president and CEO. In its entire history, Medieval Times has entertained over 70 million guests, and each location is capable of hosting over 1,000 people per show. And for anyone who hasn't been in a while, you're in luck. The show is overhauled every 4 to 6 years, giving past audience members ample reason to come back. The 2018 overhaul, for instance, required the creation of over 700 new costume pieces, 200 suits of armor, 500 lighting cues, 300 music cues, and an entirely new musical score. Those are Game of Thrones numbers. It likewise forced the cast into overdrive as they had to continue to perform while simultaneously undergoing a 3-month rehearsal process for a seamless transition from the old show to the new one. That sounds pretty grueling, and the performers apparently agreed. In 2022, the employees at the New Jersey Medieval Times location filed for a union election in an attempt to form a union with the American Guild of Variety Artists. What ensued was a vicious battle that saw multiple lawsuits filed against the unionizing hopefuls, along with an attempt by the Buena Park workers to unionize as well later that year. Medieval Times thereafter gave out raises to non-unionizing castles, successfully got the burgeoning union's TikTok banned, and attempted, but failed, to sue the American Guild of Variety Artists for trademark infringement. In response, many at the Buena Park location went on strike in early 2023, but the show went on without them. Medieval Times went so far as to fly in out-of-town nights to take the places of unionizers, and many crossed the picket line to get their shot at medieval glory. Many of the striking employees were quickly finding themselves jobless, and the strike came to an end in November, just 9 months after it started. That same month, officials with the National Labor Regulations Board began looking into medieval times' response to the burgeoning unions, and many accused medieval times of illegal union busting. Regardless, in March of 2024, all efforts to unionize ultimately collapsed, leaving those who tried to unionize either jobless or otherwise without any of their desired gains. It's the kind of response you'd expect from a ruthless king, so you can't accuse medieval times of not sticking with the theme. For those looking to trade in their soup and potatoes for a chance at glory, getting knighted at medieval times means starting at the ground level as a squire. As a squire, you'll tend to the horses, carry around weapons, and otherwise act as a stagehand during the show, moving around props and set pieces. During downtime, you can train for more knightly duties, but medieval times prioritizes such training for squires who show real promise. They want squires who can ride horses, who can perform stunts and engage in mock combat, and who already have some level of charisma and acting ability. Aspiring knights must then pass a physical and aptitude test, which requires them to run a 10-minute mile, and to be able to do 30 push-ups, 5 pull-ups, and 50 sit-ups. Wait, why do knights have to run? Isn't that what the horses are for? Success means proper knight training, which can last anywhere from a few months to a whole year. Unfortunately, only men can currently become medieval times squires, and only men can likewise become knights. For those who don't quite have what it takes for knighthood, medieval times also hires both male and female servers, who are called serfs and wenches, respectively, merchants to peddle their gift shop goods, and stable hands to take care of the horses. Still, for women looking to make a medieval splash, there's hope. In late 2017, after some guests complained about the lack of women in the show, Medieval Times, for the first time in its then 34-year history, ditched the show's king and replaced him with a queen, a role that requires 2 months of horseback training for the proper handling of the queen's Andalusian steed. It's good to be queen. So, what do you think? Have you ever been to Medieval Times? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, check out some of these other Weird History Food videos.